What's up guys? So today I wanted to do a quick follow-up video on hamons. So in the last video we did a knife build and I attempted my first hamon and we got semi-decent results with that knife. And I ended up making a second knife with a slightly different design, but used the same process for the hamon. Now the steel I used for this knife was 1084, the first knife was 1080. There are slight differences between these two steels, but the heat treating procedure is pretty much the same. They both have the same cooling curves and whatnot. I was going to make a video on the entire build process of this knife, but I ran into a problem with the video side of things. I accidentally deleted some footage and all kinds of stuff went wrong with the video production side of this knife build, so this is the video that I have. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is the clay application. Again, I used the Rutland's furnace cement out of a caulk tube. And with this being the second time I've used it, I'm starting to realize that I think a slightly thinner mixture of the clay or the furnace cement would be a better option. The hard part about this furnace cement is getting it to exactly where you want it. It tends to come out really thick and I think it needs to be thinned. I don't know what the chemical makeup of this stuff is, and I don't know if you could thin it. I don't know if it would be reasonable to thin it. They do make specialty hamon clay, or basically stuff that is made specifically for making hamons. Apparently it is a lot runnier and you can get it exactly to where you want on the blade. With this furnace cement you can't get really thin lines and it basically comes out again super thick and you can't really do much with it once it comes out of the tube. The other thing that I noticed was that anywhere that the cement lays on the blade, you're going to get a slight discoloration in the blade. I was trying to get a slightly less fuzzy hamon with this attempt and it didn't really work out, and I kind of got exactly the same results as I got the first time. So I think a lot of that has to do with the clay application. If anybody knows how to thin the furnace cement, I will definitely try that next time if I decide to attempt one of these in the future. The other thing is that in order for the clay to stick, you really need to leave a rougher surface finish on the blade before heat treatment. I sanded to 150 grit and my clay actually fell off halfway through the quenching process. I still ended up getting a decent hamon, but if it had fallen off earlier, I might not have gotten a hamon in the first place. And sanding to 150 grit before heat treatment means that most of your finish work has to be done after heat treatment, which makes it significantly more difficult and time consuming to sand because you're sanding hardened steel versus fully annealed steel. If I wasn't doing a hamon, I'd be sanding up to just about my finishing grit pre-heat treatment. It saves a lot of time and a lot of sandpaper sanding pre-heat treatment versus after heat treatment. So now for the heat treating info. Since I have this new oven, I can give you exact numbers, or at least the numbers that I'm using. It seems like the even heat ovens all kind of give different readouts as far as their actual temperature goes, but for my oven, I put this steel in at 1400 degrees and brought it up to 1475. Now what I mean by that is I programmed the oven for 1475 and I waited until the oven reached 1400 degrees to put the blade in. Now my theory behind that is that, I don't know, the blade may spend slightly less time past critical. That way you get slightly less decarb. That's just kind of a theory. You're still looking at a good 15 minutes for the oven to go from 1400 degrees to 1475. So the blade's in there for a long time and it's definitely up to temperature by the time you reach 1475. I soaked it for a minute or two and then brought it out and quenched it. Now my clay ended up falling off after several seconds of being in the oil, and that's fine. I ended up getting the hamon. If it had fallen off the second I put it in the oil, I probably wouldn't have gotten a hamon, but luckily it stayed on long enough. Again, it's super important to keep the steel rough in order for the clay to adhere, or you can wire wrap the blade, but you're going to have to get yourself the right kind of wire. Not just any wire will work. Then I took it inside and put it in the oven and tempered it at 400 degrees. I did 2 cycles at 2 hours each cycle. After the tempering, it was back out to hand sanding. Now, this is the time consuming part because you're sanding hardened steel with 150 grit scratches in it all the way to 2000 grit. This takes a long time. This is going to take a solid afternoon of sanding. At least it took me a solid afternoon of sanding to get this blade to 2000 grit. So after we ended up sanding it 2000 grit, into the ferric chloride it goes. And I did just like I did the last time. I put it in for about 3 or 4 seconds, then pulled it out and used a paper towel to kind of redistribute the oxides that had formed on the surface of the steel. Gave it a good wipe down and then back into the ferric chloride for 3 or 4 seconds and repeated that process about 4 times or so. Then it's sprayed off with Windex with ammonia to help neutralize the acid, and then the blade is thoroughly cleaned with soapy water, which I didn't get on video. And from there you basically have a knife that is ready to polish. Now the polishing compound that I used was Mother's Metal Polish, and this is just done with a paper towel or a fingertip. Now the polishing can go on for as much or as little as you want. You don't have to spend all afternoon polishing if you don't want to. From here you basically just want to go until you get the look that you are after. You can polish this thing up to an absolute high gloss mirror polish from this point forward. As long as you sanded 2000 grit beforehand, you can get an absolute mirror polish depending on your sandpaper. So then I just went ahead and slapped a couple handles on it and called the knife done. I think the knife turned out good. The hamon turned out okay. It does have a unique look to it, and even non-knife people are going to look at it and say, what the heck is different on that blade than any other knife? They're going to be able to tell there's something different about it. The downside, or the real downside in my opinion, of these hamons is the fact that they take so much extra time to make and produce, and there's just not that much benefit to them. But obviously you can see the results that you get even with an average hamon. It just looks kind of cool. Now there are certain performance benefits for certain knives with hamons, but personally, and this is just me personally, performance wise, I think I would rather pay more for a more premium steel than I would for a knife with a hamon, with just regular old 1095 or 1075 or W1 or W2. Now, I'm not a steel snob. I don't have to have the latest and greatest steel to be happy. But again, I think I'd rather pay for a more premium steel than I would for a knife with a hamon. I would love to hear your thoughts on this subject, especially when it comes to what your personal preferences are. Would you pay more money for a 1075 1095 knife with a hamon versus say a knife in 3V? What would you rather have? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you guys for watching, and hopefully next time I'll have a better video for you. The next video might be slightly different. We'll see. So I guess I'll see you next time. Have a good one, guys.